Hello and welcome to the So Far So Rare podcast. This week I spoke with Sriram Krishnan and he is an investor in SoRare. He's also a very passionate player. We talked about both the investing side and what that entails and also the playing side. We discussed the reward system, what's going on, a few support issues this week, and answered lots of your questions. I really hope you enjoy the episode. Please do like the video and please do subscribe to 1:37 p.m. So I'm joined by Sriram Krishnan. Unfortunately, we got the wrong one. We meant to book a different guy, and we ended up with you. But you'll do, I suppose.
If
Hopefully,
I'm
you've got a SoRare hat.
Are you sure you got the right one?
Maybe we got the right one at the end.
But, that's a running joke. But sorry, John. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to give you a very quick introduction. Just say you're Rivaldo 2000 on SoRare. You joined on New Year's Eve in 2020. So you were in a couple of months before the boom, I suppose. You're infamous for calling people Muppets. And yeah, you're here to chat SoRare. I'm really looking forward to getting stuck in. Do you want to give people just a very quick sort of summary of you, where you're at in terms of SoRare, just to give them an idea of kind of who you are, your biases, and whatever else?
Yeah, absolutely. So I came in pretty heavy during the boom, or just pre-boom, and bought up a lot of cards. I did not know what I was doing, and we'll come to that in a bit. But I consider myself a D3 first player with D3 D4 and the fallback and throwaway of D2. I didn't do D1.
We're pretty much the same level there, I'd say.
Yeah, and about my gallery is about 140 to 150 ETH at the moment. So you could sort of compartmentalize me in whatever category you want. But I'm mostly a D3, D4, and occasionally D2 player.
Cool. So yeah, you've got some cracking cards. I'm just looking at your gallery there. You've one unique, but you've got a Ronaldo super rare. Fortunately, he's let you down a bit this season, but the Arsene Sakarian super rare is beautiful, and you have a nice messy rare there. The unique, you've got one. Did you ever have any more?
I did. So when I jumped into SoRare early last year, I had no idea what I was doing. And I was just auctioning and bidding on some random cards. And I actually won a Dario Benedetto unique. And again, I think in fiat, so forgive me, but I won it for 3,500 US. And at that point, he was playing for Marseille. I forget who he was playing for, and he was barely doing anything. And I was twiddling my thumbs for a long time, wondering why on earth did I buy this player? Am I playing unique now? And anyway, long story short, I then sold him to someone for a little bit of a markup, right? And now, lo and behold, he goes to was it River Plate or Boca? I forget, and he's doing really well. So I used to have him. Edin Dzeko, I've always wanted. I've been toying, selling him or keeping him. But you know what? He's the only unique I have. I'm probably going to end up just keeping him because he's a good player, a good collectible, potential value and down the line. Yeah. I don't know. Still playing. So.
He's scoring well. Recently. A couple of goals recently. Or at least decisives. I haven't particularly been following him, but yeah. I think something really interesting about you as well, just for people listening who don't have a clue. You're an investor in SoRare, and I kind of want to start off just talking about that because, to be quite frank, I think, like, from my perspective anyway, and I don't pretend to be particularly well versed in anything to do with the kind of world of investing and whatever else, Series A and Series B fundings and all this, it's kind of gibberish to me other than the numbers. And I'd like to change that. But I suppose what I always think when people say they're an investor in SoRare, there's yourself, there's Gary V, there's a million others, there's Piqué and Azpilicueta and whoever else leading different rounds of funding. What exactly does that mean, and how did you get into that position? How did you get into the position where you invested in SoRare? And when you did, how does that whole thing work? Do you give them a bunch of money and they give you equity? Do they give you, how does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So
to the layman as well, to the layman.
Absolutely. So I was very fortunate to have worked in a couple of early stage startups, technology startups, in the past 15 years or so. So when you work in an early stage technology startup, you often get compensated through a regular salary as well as equity, right? So the thing about startups that people are interested in is accumulating or some form of equity, and you can get that equity through working at a startup or investing in a startup. Now, back in the day, about 10, 12 years ago, I had no idea what investing, I have no idea. I had no clue about investing. So for me, it was, working in a startup, which which introduced me to the early stage technology ecosystem, right? So what that meant was I actually got plugged into a world where there are a bunch of other startups, trying to change the world, so to speak, or trying to, create innovative solutions to problems, or try to create new consumer experiences. Right now, the thing about the early stage startup world is a lot of people trying different things. It's like a series of experiments that are happening at any given time, right, through these startups, and not all these startups are successful. So a majority of these startups fail. Now, all the companies that you see today, Google's, Apple's of the world were once startups, right? And they succeeded. So all the companies that you see today, SoRare, for example, used to be a small company, now it's bigger. All the tech companies you see today started off as early stage startups. Now, so again, because I was working in a couple of them, I was very lucky to have joined Spotify very early on, when they were valued, very lowly. I forget what it was, but it gave me the opportunity to understand the early stage ecosystem. Now, I then stumbled onto investing because my colleague, and boss at that point, Daniel Ek of Spotify, co-founder, CEO of Spotify, he started investing in other startups, and I thought that was really cool to be able to deploy small amounts of capital into other startups as well. And when you do that as an investor, you actually acquire equity, a small piece of ownership in the company, right? So I started doing that because it was cool, and over time I actually liked it because you actually meet very smart people who are out to build something, unique and amazing and game changing, right? So anyway, so long story short, I did that for a period of time, and then I did that enough at a frequent enough basis. To the point where I started a small little fund. It's a $3.5 million fund that invests in early stage startups. I personally invest in late stage startups. So there's a big difference between early stage and late stage. It's different
Less risk
profiles.
Yeah.
Correct. That's right. That's absolutely right. And so sort of fast forward the journey to December 2020 was when I think I was first introduced to the team. I heard about SoRare through a friend who is into fantasy FPL, and he told me there's another game out there that's raising venture capital. And again, for me, that's football, and tech. I generally, gravitate towards that. Got to know the team, and then December 31st was when I tried signing up for an account, and I had no idea. We can come to that in a little bit later, but I had no idea what the fuck I was doing because the product was very raw, right? And anyway, ended up investing and acquiring a very, very, very small percentage of the company. Again, it's a big round, a lot of people with bigger investors. I'm just a minority and investor. So that's the process, right? So I started off because I worked in technology startups, stumbled into investing because I thought it was cool and fun, and then invariably got connected to a bunch of different founders and found out about SoRare and got connected to them and invested. So that's sort of the long story short version. Now, with regards to me as a player, after investing, I was still very confused with the product and layout, and I wanted to participate because I invested, and I said this is something I should be into, but I was only into FPL, and I wasn't that familiar with the nature of crypto native applications or Web3 native applications like SoRare. But I think I overcame that hump when I forced myself to learn and understand, and that's when I jumped in. So if you looked at my earliest purchases, you'll see that I just YOLO'd my way into buying a bunch of, I think this is an experience that any typical SoRare manager goes through.
It happens us all.
You buy a bunch and you're like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, I'm playing like the Americas and the Asias. I have no idea what I'm doing. So anyway, so that's my story.
You picked up a Maradona nice and early. Your Ronaldo, Neymar, straight in. And you know what? When you look at the values now, it's hilarious. Were you popping champagne bottles in, was it September, whenever they announced the Series B? Were you over the moon?
I was very happy for the team. I actually reinvested in the company because I thought, so I personally thought that the valuation was pretty high, but I also knew that whenever you have consumer companies like SoRare break through, they very quickly will grow into the valuation, right? And that point, SoRare was a 12-person, 13-person team. It was crazy. So for me, even though I thought the valuation was high at that point, I knew they were going to grow into it and beyond.
Yeah.
So for me, it was a very easy, look, SoRare takes up about 20, 30 hours a week for me. So, I want to still be part of the story. I want to, I'm as much of a player as anyone else.
Yeah.
I get emotional, my emotional, my emotional being on weekends is highly dependent on my, my lineup scores. So for me, it was, an opportunity to double down. So I wasn't, I think we're all happy for the company, but I think it was an opportunity to invest more into the company.
Yeah. There's a couple of things based off what you said there that I just have questions on, right? So the first one is, I think it's a nice thing that you're obviously an investor. Now, I don't understand necessarily the relationship you have with SoRare on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis, or even quarterly. But something that sometimes people, myself included, I don't know if it's feedback or what it is, but an opinion that is out there is that because the SoRare employees can't hold SoRare accounts and play SoRare, quite often it's felt that they might be a little bit detached from the game and what users actually want. Maybe that's right, maybe that's wrong. There's loads of different feedback channels. I'm sure they have, obviously Dan does a lot of work in the community and there's others who are monitoring the sentiment. But as an investor who can play, that's beautiful because you're getting the real experience. You have your own frustrations. Do you have, as an investor, do you have more direct channels maybe to feed that back?
That's a good question. So the answer is and this is a very common question, and it applies to not only SoRare but a bunch of other companies I've backed. Right now, with SoRare, I consider myself, and funny you should ask, I consider myself a user first and investor second.
Yeah.
Only because that's how I view that's how ingrained it is in my life. That I consider myself a user first and investor second. The second thing that you want to know is, for me, SoRare is one out of 400 plus investments that I have.
Okay.
And so for me, I do know the Brian. I don't know Dan necessarily. I do know Nicola, but it's not like we chat all the time. And if and when we do chat, it's about helping the company out in hiring or in a potential partnership.
Yeah, like leveraging your relationships and your network
versus providing user feedback specifically, only because it's very important for me to maintain some form of separation because I used to work in technology companies myself, right? Spotify and Tinder, and a lot of people use Spotify, a lot of people use Tinder, right? And I often get confronted by with questions from my friends and family about these services, right? And oftentimes they also send me feedback. But as a BD or a growth person at these companies, I don't have the mechanism to collect these feedback and to put it into action, right? Because I'm not part of that team, and also we have the infrastructure in place internally to collect feedback from users in a structured way, right? So knowing that, if I chat with Nicholas or or Brian or anyone else at SoRare, I'm not, I'm just respectful of their time. So I sort of leverage that opportunity or that interaction for something of like a higher value assistance, right? So for example, for two reasons. One is, I feel like the community that SoRare has, it's extremely engaged and extremely, there's a high feedback loop because you're hearing about, whenever something breaks, you have 400 people on it. So it's actually the feedback loop is pretty quick. So I don't need to be another person, to bring it up, outside the channels, right? Because it'll be very annoying for them. And the second thing is, it's just leveraging, my network or my knowledge as not as a user, but as a tech, person or tech operator, which I think could be more interesting for them. So I think that's the way I see it. I don't interact with them as often as people think I do, or investors do, only because it's, again, I consider myself like all the frustrations you have, I probably will also have, right? But it doesn't mean I'm going to share it with them all the time. I'll share it through the Discord, but I'm not going to.
Separate. They're separate entities almost. And that kind of leads just to the second point, which is something that I assume you hear all the time, is that, as a user, That's one side of your brain. So the other side of the brain, as the investor, leveraging time and using it more importantly, and respecting the team's time. And you 400 companies, so RARE's just one, blah blah blah. You probably don't have 400 different caps though, which maybe says something that you're wearing a SoRare one. But through the investor side of it, through the relationship you have there, through the different communication channels, would you ever hear some information before a standard user would hear it? Like, is there an edge there?
I don't think I personally don't think there's an edge. I don't think there's an edge, only because I think the company has been very careful and thoughtful about it. And if the company, and by the way, if the company hasn't been thoughtful about it, I clearly have missed multiple. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
So I don't think there's an edge necessarily, only because for two things. One is the company provides high level updates that are very, very you'd call generic, because it's all blockchain based, very, very transparent based updates, right? And also my usage on SoRare is very, very dependent on my sort of day-to-day and my personal schedule. So I don't have the time to go deep into SoRare and identify opportunities. For me, it's very my user relationship with SoRare is very ad hoc, and very opportunistic. I don't have the time to research DNPs, suspensions. It's very intermittent. But it consumes a lot of time. But I'm not as deep as other users are. So I don't think there's any, again, there's so many investors in the company. And I don't think, if you ask them, I don't think there's any edge, being
like
an investor.
To be quite pointed with it, then I suppose the question I could say is, would you ever get communication outside the standard user that gives you information that the standard user wouldn't have? I don't think it's unnatural, or I don't think it's particularly unrealistic for that not to be the case. Obviously, yeah. I think that would be a pitchfork type event, not necessarily big time, but I think people would be like, well, why are these guys getting information before me? And it's like, well, they're investors in the company, that's why. But is that the case? Does that happen?
I think it's only normal for the company to share, priorities, hiring, with investors. But I personally don't think it has given me, I don't think what what company shares with investors would have given investors any edge whatsoever.
They're not coming to you saying we're changing fullback scoring, because that would be like, oh shit, let's go buy SoRare Trent.
To be honest, I don't pay attention as much as as I should to these updates, to SoRare updates or any other updates for that matter, and I should. But again, I don't consider them giving. And think about it this way, right? SoRare, they've generally been very, very thoughtful about communication and about community engagement, right? So I think by and large, I consider that like the way they've been acting, I feel like they've got a higher bar and level of accountability to the consumers and to the users than they do to the investors. And it kind of shows the level of investment that they've made towards user engagement, towards user communication and transparency. Obviously, there were humps along the way, but that's expected. But I see that they've put a lot more emphasis and investment into that. So I think if you ask anyone else who's an investor in SoRare, I think they'll probably give you the same answer, only because I think it's in the company's best interest to do that.
Well, look, I've peppered you a bit about that. Being an investor, I suppose there's two things that I want to throw at you off the back of it. First off, we'll lighten the mood and then we'll go back into the depths of depression. You visited SoRare HQ.
Yeah.
Tell us, was it fun? Was it nice? You kicked the
really
ball around
fun.
their little court, did you?
I did. It was really fun. Very happy. Was in Paris for a couple of weeks. Was very happy to pop in, meet the team, got some swag. And when I was working from the lobby, I was working from the ground floor, and I heard this very familiar voice, and the voice that I only I've heard during podcasts, so over Zoom. It turned out to be Mark from YNWA. Mark, I yelled at him. I was like, Mark. It was like, hey, and we ended up catching. It was really fun. It was really fun. I really enjoyed that, and it was that serendipitous conversation with Mark, who who sort of onboarded me on SoRare very early on, and I had no idea what I was doing. But it was that serendipitous conversation talking about SoRare data, how does he put his lineups, opening up it was really fun. Yeah,
that's nice. Yeah, I think like I definitely want to visit HQ before the end of the year. Maybe even both offices, who knows? But I think there is something special about meeting other SoRare managers. We were saying just before we recorded that, like in your day to day life and in everyday life, I'd say 99% of users, 95 anyway, don't have someone who's actually like a friend for years outside of SoRare, outside of Twitter, outside of Discord, that they can meet for a coffee and set teams with. It's not that mainstream yet. Hopefully one day we get there, but I think like when I went to Barcelona, it was amazing. And within the next sort of 3 weeks, I'm going to Calp. I don't know if it's Calpe or Calp in Spain. Meeting Quinny and Hendo and a few other guys, and we're going to a couple of matches there. Then me and Quinny are actually going to Manchester to watch Manchester versus Sporting Lisbon. Now, the fixture's all but done. I think they won 5-0 last night, but still it'll be nice. Hopefully I can bump into some people. I'm going to Berlin myself on a sort of personal trip in about next weekend, and I've reached out to Niftio, who was on the podcast before. He's based in Berlin. Might meet up with him, anyone else who's about. But it's just there's something special about meeting up with other SoRare managers, and one day we'll do the New York trip, and hopefully you'll be there.
It'll be really fun. We should put something together. I think the SoRare data guys are also here. We can get AJ or A.J. to come up. It'll be really fun.
And we can set up SoRareCon, and I can utilize my domain, my Web2 domain, SoRareCon.com. It's for sale if you want it.
Sorry. Sorry, go ahead. I think
the less said, the better.
The FPL community has about 8 million users, and it's safe to say that 4 million of them are active. And FPL is you do that for bragging rights, right? Because it's free. I think SoRare is like for those who are passively interested in football and want to be engaged with the sport at some level, FPL is a great way to get in. But SoRare is for the diehards who who want to. And it's always nice to meet a fellow SoRare manager. Like meeting a fellow FPL manager does not give you the same, excitement. But meeting a fellow SoRare manager, because it's like, hey, I see a man of culture over there. You know what I mean? It's
see a man of culture, the hat on over the headset.
It's like the hat tip and going, yes, I see you. I see you.
Yeah, no, I can't wait. I think like it'll be a huge thing for them. Obviously, I think COVID's ruined it to an extent, and obviously now they're so stretched, which we'll get on to. But I think obviously as their infrastructure improved and they employ more people, I think SoRareCon type events will be just part and parcel of the year, every quarter, every 6 months, biannually, something like that, even an annual one. And I think there would be a huge reception because let's be quite frank, it's a high net worth individual space. I'd say a lot of people could afford to fly to it,
And imagine, by the way, you do it over the Euros or the World Cup, and then you have all these special tournaments. That'll be really fun.
Absolutely. And then like special NFTs for attending and stuff like this. The sky's the limit. There's so much that could be done. And that leads me on to the next point, kind of from the investor side and also from the user side. You infamously, as I said at the start, you called, I don't know whether it was individuals or the community in general, Muppet, who didn't have a clue what they were at, but there was a perception that SoRare, and I have to say, like, I have kind of banged the drum myself, maybe wrongly, and if you disagree, I'd love you to counter, that SoRare are moving really slow. It has been a while since we've had anything meaningful, it feels. Now, how long is a while? I mean, to be fair, it's only been, 4 or 5 months since Bundesliga, La Liga, Series B, etc. So whenever you actually put it in perspective and think back 5 months, maybe it hasn't been that long. But I think in terms of the rewards and how flawed they've been, in terms of this progression bar that seems to never be coming, I mean, some things definitely have been slow. What's your general perception or what's your reaction if I say to you, SoRare are moving too slow?
Yeah, so I can give you so many perspectives, and all these perspectives are not wrong. right? Because these are perspectives, and it's not a question of right or wrong. I think it's a question of priority. So I think we are in it day to day, and we sort of at a high level, we tend to overestimate what a company can do in a 1-2 year period, but underestimate what a company can do in a 3 to 5 year period, right? So what that means is it's only normal and fair for users like us to be restless and to think that the company is acting slowly, because we're in it day to day and we don't see the changes that that has to happen. Now, but over a 3 to 5 year period, these changes will happen, and the company and the games will get better and better, whether it's rewards, dynamics, whatever. So I'm fairly bullish on these things happening eventually, right? The question is timing and priorities. Now, what AJ mentioned, like, I'm not disagreeing with him, but I also think that having seen how the company has scaled from 10 people, 12 people to now 30, 40, 50 people, I do think I am personally giving them a lot more leeway and a lot more time, only because I know what's it like, right? And also, companies tend to slow down before they start sprinting again. So I think what we're seeing is SoRare is scaling up from 18 people to 80 people. And that process, when you're onboarding new employees, it usually takes a lot of time, blah, blah, blah. So it's very normal for startups to slow down before they start accelerating again, because that's what scale brings you. That's what more people brings you. So I think, your perspective on SoRare being too slow is correct, and it's fair. And I also think my perspective that is, the company will will eventually get to this, and have also made, pretty amazing progress over the past few months, and will eventually deal with the things that, we all are frustrated with. And I think I think these two perspectives can coexist. I think they've done a phenomenal job in the past 2 years, right? If you see the things that have shipped, it's just, again, if we take a high level perspective, if you see a roadmap, they've done, D5, the limited, they've done, Bundesliga, they've done, new league, they've done this, they've done that. So it's the pace of execution is actually pretty quick at a macro level. It's just that we operate, we use SoRare on a daily basis. We don't see it, changing meaningfully, but at a high level, I do think they've been executing really, really quickly. Now, a lot of people will disagree, and they're also right. But I generally tend to have a very macro perspective, and I'm a lot more forgiving of folks who are operating in the company, only because I've done it myself, and I'm trying to be empathetic. But it also does not mean that you are incorrect. You know what I mean? Like if you think that they're slow, they are probably slow. But I just have different perspectives.
I think, like, I have two things to throw back on that. Not necessarily throw back at you, but just to contribute. I think personally myself, I wouldn't say I'm guilty of it, but I am a bit more macro thinking and patient with them. Because while I'm throwing the slow question to you, and while maybe last week in the podcast I was mentioning the slowness again to techers, and it's more the sentiment that I'm feeling, and the sentiment that I'm gauging through the feedback to my content as well, of that slowness. But personally, I'm not worried about it or getting revved up, because for me, with the amount of effort and time and resources I put into creating SoRare content, both on YouTube and here and Twitter, the amount of that I do, the DMs I reply to every day from beginners, all of that, for me, it's a macro play based on the long-term future of SoRare. I'm not doing this for the now in SoRare. I'm doing this because I believe in 2 years' time I could be full-time at this. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
I hope that SoRare gets big enough that I can bank my future on that.
Yep.
The second thing to throw in is just probably a shit analogy. I'm getting known for them. But maybe it's relevant. It's just that time distortion between maybe the SoRare team and SoRare or investors versus the average consumer and user. It might not compare, but in my day job, I'm an air traffic controller, high stress environment.
Wow.
No
Super
time.
Stress.
Yeah, no time more so than when you get a May Day. I'm only 28. I've had maybe 3 or 4 May Days in my career so far, which is actually quite high in terms of, like, I have colleagues who've been there for 20 years, haven't had one. I've been quite unlucky. But they always talk about when we're trained for that for the air traffic controller, because what'll happen is a pilot will go, Mayday, Mayday, engine number 2's out, we'll call you back, or bird strike, we'll call you back, we've lost pressure, we'll call you back, smoke in the cockpit, whatever. And for an air traffic controller, our first job is just to acknowledge, right? We just say, Roger, and we let them deal with the emergency. For us, it feels like an eternity until they call again, because we're sat there, we can do nothing. Maybe we're busy, maybe we're clearing the skies, maybe we're moving other planes, maybe we're rejigging things. But if it's a quiet outside that, it feels like an eternity until that pilot tells you, when realistically it might have been 90 seconds, it might have been 60 seconds since his first call. But they always talk about the time distortion, because you're sitting there on your hands thinking like, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. And all you want to do is contact them and get more information. But it's the worst thing you can do, because they're going through checklists, working out what they need to do. And the worst thing you can do is butt in, because if you butt in, they have to restart a checklist. That's like a rule in piloting. Like, there's pilots listen, maybe you'll disagree or know the actual intricacies of it, but that's what we're told in ATC. From the pilot's perspective, time, they just want time. They want more time. There isn't enough time. Time is flying. And it's that distortion in that it can be 2 minutes. To me, it feels like 30 minutes. To him, it feels like 2 seconds. And it's not quite the same, but I feel like there's a similarity in terms of, like, in the SoRare offices, they're probably working at 1,000,000 miles a minute, feeling like they're getting things done and moving. To the average consumer who's on the outside, looking at the company from the outside, not hearing what's happening in the cockpit.
Yeah.
Do you know? To us, it feels like nothing's happening. We're sat there just waiting. But we're not hearing what's going on the other side of the comms. We don't have a clue. And in that case, where the kind of relevance of the analogy comes in is, I think what a lot of people just want is the pilot, aka Nicholas or Dan, to say, here's what we're currently doing. This is an ETA, and when we'll get back to you.
Yeah.
Do you know, this is what our priority list is. Leave us be for a minute while we work away. Do you know?
Yeah.
For a shit analogy, I think it's actually okay.
No, it's actually pretty good. And, you know, there are a lot of things that are happening behind the scenes, right? That a lot of people don't have, you know, are not privy to. But also, like, you know, you mentioned investors and employees. I think, you know, I think the SoRare, you know, I personally have like a 3, 4, 5, 10-year horizon with SoRare, right? Because I think it's, you know, so for me, you know, whatever micro changes that happen on a daily or weekly basis, you know, has less of an impact, you know, to me, only because I see things from a 5, 10-year horizon. I think SoRare is going to be a massive company, and whatever daily fluctuations that happen, you know, game rewards, dynamic rewards, mechanics, this, you know, I tend to overlook them only because I've got that, you know, I'm pegged towards a longer time horizon, right? Whereas if you're playing it on a daily, weekly basis, and, you know, trying to, you know, hit the thresholds on a weekly basis, I can see how, you know, this would, you know, how people would react, right? If there's no news on a weekly basis. So I think you're right about the time distortion and the perspectives. It's very, very different. You know, working at a startup, 1 year could feel like 4 years because there's so many things to do, and being outside of it, you know, 4 months could you know, of nothing happening, you know, could feel like, you know, a year of nothing happening. Because we're in it, you know, day to day. So it's actually two sides of the same coin if you think about it. So, you know, employees of startups, you know, because it's 1,000,000 miles an hour, you know, 4 months feels like a year. But for us players who play it, you know, 10, 20 hours a week, you know, twice a week, deadlines, you know, 4 months of non-activity feels like 2 years of non-activity. So it's like the two sides of the same coin. But I'm bullish. I'm long-term. I do think, you know, let's put it this way. They know what needs to be fixed. They know what the priorities are because everyone tells them, right? You know, so I think for me, it's a question of timing and priority versus whether or not it gets fixed, right? Because if they're not fixing this, it must mean that they're probably trying to figure out something else that's higher impact or that's more important, right? So it's not like they don't know. I think it's just a matter of sequencing, you know, given current resources, sequencing what's important. And then with more resources, they should be able to tackle a lot more things. So I do think, again, they know what we are, you know, we're all complaining about. I think it's a question of, do we do it now versus you know, something else that's higher priority, or like 5 months down the line?
In terms of that priority list, though, do you feel that there's a sentiment in the community where they feel maybe they're prioritizing growth over the current user base's happiness or enjoyment or experience? Do you know, where they're looking for these new licenses, they're looking to promote it, they're looking to, do you know that kind of general sentiment that I'm on about?
Yeah, I think so. So
they will both inevitably end up in the same place, or the former will eventually satisfy the latter. It's just a case of what happens in the now.
yeah,
Maybe the user experience of the now is suffering, but maybe they are growing. Or
so the thing is, it's very hard to say because when I was at Tinder and Spotify, we had a lot of user complaints about how the apps were designed and built. Let me sort of give you another analogy, right? A shitty analogy it might be.
sometimes they
But
come good. I mean,
yeah,
coleslaw lasagna was
yeah.
amazing.
I
The
was
pilot and
surprised
air
that
traffic control
I was
worked out.
surprised that's a thing. Yeah. Um, Coleslaw lasagna.
I'll buy you one.
When I heard that. But at Facebook, when they changed their newsfeed from one version of a newsfeed to another version of the newsfeed donkey years ago, a lot of people complained about the change, right? Because they're so accustomed to seeing one newsfeed. Again, Facebook is I'm dating myself, but when you actually look at the metrics, consumers are actually spending more time on the product, right? So I do think so I don't know what the answer to the question is. If I was SoRare, I'd be prioritizing both, right? Because growth and user satisfaction are both very, very important. But I do think there's some element of hey, you know what? We're going to be spending a lot. We're spending a lot of time on the app anyway. So from a metrics perspective, things are still looking good, right? And if the metrics are still looking good, and people are still going to be complaining, then why not grow at the top of the funnel? Right. So I don't know what the answer to the question is. I do think growing the platform is inevitable. I think it's something that they have, for the sake of the liquidity, for the sake of the marketplace, for the sake of everything else, growing the platform makes a lot of sense. I don't know whether it's at the expense of user happiness and engagement, because it's very important to SoRare. I do think there are some valid concerns, and I'm giving a generic response here because I really don't know what the answer is. I do think they're not overlooking it. I just think, there are always going to be people complaining about things that are not happening, and they're still coming back to the product, right? They're still using it on a weekly basis, so it's still there's still a hook there. So so things are kind of working. Some people are frustrated, most people aren't. The people who are frustrated are still coming back. So from my eyes, as a consumer, tech, builder, that's inevitable, right? When in your consumer base, in your active consumer base, there's going to be always 20-30% of them who's going to be complaining, and the rest who might feel the same way but not voice out their opinions, but they do come back and use the product on a regular basis. So it's still not a bad situation to be in, right? So I can't give you an answer on whether
no
or not
one's throwing the
prioritizing
toys out of the pram to the extent that they're selling up.
Exactly.
Apart from maybe the absolute anomaly, like maybe, and they'll just start another account and just not tell anyone for pride. But anyway, a question I want to throw at you based off that macro view and looking at the next 5, 8, 10 years. If I was to ask you to be as bullish as you can be, or realistically bullish as you can be, if everything went to plan for you as an investor, as a SoRare user, what does SoRare look like in 10 years? 5 years. It's impossible to project. You can't possibly, but within the realms of what you think is even possible.
Okay, 5 years from now, we're going to look like Muppets, when we guess, what's we tend to overestimate what's happening in 1-2 years and underestimate what's happening in the next 3 to 5 years. So if I say anything now, about what SoRare is going to be in 5 years, they're probably going to be heads and shoulders beyond what we discuss. I think
that's good, because then you're reasonably going to be, you can be conservative and it can still be exciting.
No, only because my line of sight, the way I see SoRare platform, in the next 3, 4, 5 years is very linear. But what's actually going to happen is they're going to take off in ways that we cannot imagine them taking off, right?
So I don't. Gary V boom that happened 1 year ago.
That maybe other sports, maybe maybe you have a multi-sport version of a fantasy game. Maybe you have an ecosystem on top. So if you ask me, I don't know. I think they could be as big as Activision for sports. Activision's a pretty big company. There's a line of sight there. I can see that happening with fantasy, with other types of games, with an ecosystem built on top, with a bunch of feeder games. I can see them becoming a media company, right? A sports media company, the next ESPN, the next. I can see that happening.
That's something I always talk about, and I always feel like I'm being over bullish you know, whenever I go on other people's podcasts within the space and they talk about SoRare in the future, I always go down the route of there isn't somewhere that exists and the consumer wants it, and the consumer wants it, and if it existed, they would use it. Where I can get highlights of a particular goal as it happens. I get to see who scored, and I have to wait till later and try and access highlights through the right license and package.
Yeah.
What everyone who watches football wants, and whoever can provide it wins, is 10-second clips of goals, assists, goal line clearances, penalties, red cards. That's golden. Is that too much to potentially expect?
So licensing is a pain in the ass, but I can't. So licensing is still stuck in the caveman years, right? Where it's still it's all legacy licenses that are carved out in ways that that it's been going on for the last 20, 30 years. It's the same old, same old. But I can see a world where bite-sized licenses, like imagine this. Many years ago, we have collectible, physical cards, right? And then came digital cards, and people are wondering, wait, what's this? And and the Premier Leagues of the world and the La Ligas of the world now have another revenue opportunity in the form of digital cards, right? Or digital NFTs. So I can imagine a world where licensing gets bite-sized, right? So let's go back to the previous question. What can how can what will SoRare be in the next 5 to 10 years? I can see a line of sight towards a gaming giant, right? Activision for sports, right? I can see a line of sight from a media perspective, right? Like the new ESPN, right? I can see a line of sight to both with the broadcasting element added onto it, right? Because then you not only become media from a publishing perspective, but you also now become a broadcaster. So I can see SoRare becoming all of the above, right? But I don't know again, I don't know what the company plans are, right? What Nicola's plans are now. So yeah, I can see like companies like SoRare are what I would call companies that have captured lightning in a bottle, right? Lightning in a bottle means they have the ability to augment the gravity fields around them, right? Because of so much user engagement and because of what they've done is so unique and they've got a lot of traction. Like I can see them bending rules that would favor them. Bending the norm. So that's why it's very hard, because our norms right now, when we're asked to project stuff, we're all basing it off today's norms. But SoRare, given the phenomena that they are, they might be able to bend their way into doing stuff in the future that we cannot imagine. And whether it's bite-sized licensing, whether it's the full end-to-end sporting experience, like Manchester United collectibles, memorabilia, digital physical cards, media consumption, everything. I don't know, but when you have that powerful user base, that when you've got lightning in a bottle, you can bend. You can bend the gravitational field. So I don't know, right? So it's very hard to project in the next 1 or 2 years that it's easy, right? More sports, more users, potentially more one of 10,000, one of 2, one of 5. I don't know, but it's so easy to project, right? But in the next 5 years, who knows? So
who knows what road they take. We'll move on. I'm going to give a spoiler out to the crowd. So everyone who doesn't want to hear the spoiler, I'll say it within the next 30 seconds. So if you skip forward twice, you won't hear it. Celtic cards are coming. They've been leaked. Celtic cards are coming, which means if I just spoiled this for you.
Celtic.
No. Oh, shit. Maybe I should have told you to block your ears. So the SPFL, I'm imagining the full license, they definitely have Celtic cards. One was rewarded accidentally last midweek, I think. There's a Celtic card on the platform, which means more are coming, which means SPFL will happen. Now, people will be tuning back in after the 30-second skip, so we won't say anything specific again. But does that idea excite you without spoiling it somehow?
Yeah, of course, more leagues, better. Also, for me, I do quite enjoy leagues, and I wouldn't refer to what you just said earlier. I'll just try to keep it generic. The more leagues where you have like standout
teams,
winners, standout teams, the better. Like the Dutch league, you have Ajax, the German league, you buy. So I quite like that because it gives me an opportunity to buy, the 2 teams from that league or the 1 team from that league, and then be competitive. So I actually look forward to that.
The more leagues with dominant teams and sort of stacks that stand out means there'll be more variance in the stacks that are played and more variance in terms of teams that will win 4-0 consistently, which means that not necessarily Ajax will win or Bayern Munich will win new game weeks every time, because there's another team here that will potentially win by that margin every week.
But the same players are going to buy this, if you have an Ajax stack or a buy-in stack, you're going to go and buy a stack. Another stack.
Yeah. So anyway, look, I just wanted to put that out there. It's out there. We have a couple of things to discuss, and we'll try and get into some questions. We're probably just over halfway through, but that was brilliant. Look, thanks so much for opening my eyes and just sort of talking with the investor chat and all, and everything else. Your perspective, I think, it's quite fresh. Particularly in this podcast, because I haven't spoken to someone in your position before. So thank you so much for that.
No worries. I want to interrupt and say that Salzburg buy-in 0-0, Inter Liverpool 0-0. So.
Oh yeah, we're recording during Champions League. We planned this podcast a couple of weeks ago and maybe didn't have the foresight, but yeah, you have a stack or two going, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I actually have, I think, 7 players from buy-in playing.
Oh wow!
I open up my SoRare data. I have 8 players from SoRare. Sorry, from 1, 2, 3. Yeah.
Inter and Liverpool are 11 minutes in, and Trent has already lost. He's already minus 4.1 in his AA. He's created he's an attempt, 2 attempted assists, or 1 attempted assist, but in terms of possession lost, he's doing what he does best and just kicking the ball to the opposition while trying to create. I do think fullbacks are over penalised. Maybe I'm biased, but that's not what we're here to talk about. Something I want to throw at you. Again, I don't know how much you care about this, but there's 2 things just on the support channel on SoRare. One that's important people here, the other one, which is, I don't know, controversial. Dan put in today at 10:19 a.m. FC Carlos Stein versus Club Universitario de Deportes. The coverage, Opta's coverage is tier 9 for that game. Now, I don't know which one of these clubs, but there's players here that are licensed. Which means just live scores, goal scores, lineups, bookings, subs, formations, assists, and penalty shootout scores. That's below the required coverage for a SoRare game week fixture. I imagine that's in the T's and C's of the game. The fixture will therefore not be scored in game week 246. They apologize for the inconvenience. I suppose the way I want to put this to you is is that good enough? I suppose SoRare have a data package from the most reputable and top sort of data provider in terms of football across the globe, which is Opta. All they can do, unless they go and send little people to watch every single game in the world, is rely on Opta for those stats. If Opta don't give a sufficient covering for a fixture, I don't know if there's an option there for SoRare to pay for them to do so, to fund the extra coverage, or what it is. But my question is, can SoRare do better on that front, or do you think that's out of control? Because I seen someone on Twitter today who literally bought 5 or 6 of the highest scoring player in that fixture, trading based off it, hoping that he could flip the player, which is a completely legitimate strategy. But now the fixture's been dropped and he's probably going to lose money.
Yeah. So, I mean, Opta is a dependency, right? And they're the biggest and best data provider to everyone, actually. This does not only apply to SoRare, it applies to everyone else in the world. So it's an unfortunate dependency, but it is a dependency. I think, I don't think it's the way I look at it is these things happen. You got to take it on the chin. I've got many lineups crushed due to COVID DMPs. During the COVID, remember a few weeks ago, a year ago, there were a bunch of games that got canceled last minute, and we all had DMPs. I think it's just part and parcel of the game. Black swan events like this, there's inevitably in an open marketplace like SoRare, some people are bound to get, hurt. Some people are bound to get, bound to be on the wrong side of the transaction, and these things happen. I'm not sad nor happy for this person, because it's just one of these things that happen. And let me give you another example, which is not similar, but it's analogous. I stupidly thought Adrian was the second goalkeeper for Liverpool, and I snapped up about 15 rares and then a couple of super rares, and then someone on Discord told me that it's actually some other guy, and I was like,
Kelleher,
yeah, exactly. So I look, and this is me. I follow the EPL more regularly than anyone else, and I'm not. It happens, right? So I'm not. Again, I'm not blaming that person. I'm not blaming SoRare. I'm not blaming Opta. It's stuff like this that happens. That you just have to take it on the chin, and it's part and parcel of the game. So it's unfortunate, but it is what it is.
I think if I knew there was a way SoRare could do it in terms of saying, here, lads, we'll give you an extra 5 grand or 10 grand or whatever, I don't even know how much it would cost to give us the full level of coverage for that game. If they have to prepare that ahead of time and therefore they can do it. I mean, if there was a way SoRare could make it happen, then yes, I do feel SoRare could be accountable. I don't know the answer to that question, but I feel as it stands, where, as you say, Opta is a dependency, I mean, that's out of SoRare's control in that instance, and it just is what it is, and you have to take it in the chin. And I think the one lesson there is, when you're trading around fixtures, when you're trading around anything, you should never throw all your eggs in the one basket, because things like this do happen. It's about diversity and about responsible trading, because it's not gambling.
No, exactly. But also, like, if SoRare, if there was a mechanism for SoRare, if there was another tier for, I'm sure SoRare would have signed up for some form of coverage, right? So I think it's more of an Opta dependency than anything, an Opta limitation. And by the way, again, I'm just brainstorming here, but one thing SoRare could do, because it's highly reliant on data, is I can imagine a world where a third-party company gets built, to compete with Okta, and the likes of SoRare could invest in it or could build their own, right, through a third-party partnership, and then encourage an Opta competitor in the market, right? And that could be more granular, more feet, more people on the streets, on the stadiums covering it. So that could be some interesting, off tangent, product roadmap, direction that SoRare can take down the line. Yeah,
absolutely. We'll move on to the next thing. Which is that I got a couple of messages, unfortunately, on Twitter, and sorry to those who got burnt. I don't know how they ended up there. I don't know how it happened. But Dan put out a thing today, have to, saying, please keep away from this website, m-sorare.com. Do not go to that website. It's a dangerous phishing website that attempts to get your SoRare credentials. Ensure you use two-factor authentication for your SoRare accounts and use a safe password that isn't used anywhere else. If you have any further questions, reach out to them at the help center. A few people got burnt by this. I don't know exactly how it worked, but it sounds pretty shit. So if you're listening, definitely just be careful out there. There's nothing really to say that. That's more a word of warning, but if you have something to add, please do.
Yeah. My advice is, I used to have the same password, different versions of the same password for everything, many years ago, and then downloaded something called 1Password, right? Which I install as a plugin, which now creates unique passwords for everything I use. So if one thing gets hacked, I don't get, it's a single point of failure versus multi. It's not single point of failure. It's it's if one thing gets hacked, it doesn't sort of spread anywhere else. So that's one thing I would advise. Get like a 1Password or a password generating service that stores your password. You don't know these passwords will store it for you. The second thing is obviously,
what happens if you need to, like, if you change your device? Is it just that you have one account in it and it stores everything else?
No, so you have a mobile app version of this of the service and a browser version of the service. So for example, if you create a login, for SoRare, and then because you have a browser plugin, at the password entry, it'll prompt you to click on this app. And the autofill will recommend this app, and then the app will recommend a 16 character password that you can save, and once you save it, automatically saves in the plugin. Cool. And then when you're trying to log in from your mobile, it's stored in the mobile as well.
Auto-populates.
Yeah, exactly. So do that. And the second one is two-factor. Like SoRare it has an in-game economy. It's the cards are all worth something. And inevitably, there are a lot of people who might want to will come in and try to scam or scheme you out of these things. So I would use a different password for everything, and then and use a two-factor to save myself. Yeah.
Absolutely. The next thing, and probably the most contentious thing of the day, is rewards. Now, what I'm going to say about rewards.
Red Bull Salzburg just scored. God.
Tell me it was Brendan Aronson.
There goes the stacks.
Oh. You see, I picked Aronson for a lineup because Munich lost like 5-1 or something to Bochum or something, didn't they?
Yeah.
So I was like, if they can do that, Salzburg can do something.
Chukwu Buike Adamu, who came in the 12th minute for Noah Okafor.
Okay, let's hope Aronson got the assist. Byron Stacker's in the mud. So, rewards, which you mightn't get any of this week based on that news. Dan put out something yesterday. Basically, look, we all know the kind of gist of what's happened over the last week, if you missed it. basically, Techers last week was in the podcast, and we talked a bit about the under 23 rewards for the weekend. That happened to coincide with a mad weekend where I had 414 points in under 23, and I got a low tier 2. It was very close to being a tier 3 reward. People were getting even higher points than that, and like
463.
463
and tier 1.
Yeah, the case in point, that sort of thing was happening. Now, it did coincide with a particularly high scoring week. You know, a lot of the big players did bang, a lot of 90s and 100s. But the bottom line was that the under 23 rewards didn't increase, even given the Austrian Bundesliga and whatever else coming back. This week, for the under 23s this weekend, the rewards were adjusted and then they were manually tapered back, and people seen this happen. And they weren't very happy. And basically, I think at this stage, everyone's just calling for a bit of clarity about how the rewards work. There has been calls for it and complaints about the rewards for as long as I can remember now. I don't know, 6, 7, 8, 9 months. And now it's kind of coming to a halt. I feel like all sides of the community, whether they used to be shut up and get on with it, or whether they used to be diehard reward system haters, I think a lot of people are singing off the same hymn sheet now. And yesterday, Dan put out a couple of pieces of comms, but this is kind of the main one that at 7 o'clock yesterday, which was on Tuesday. We know that everyone here would like more clarity on the reward system in place and our plans for gameplay and the rewards system. I've talked about Dan a lot this podcast. For anyone who's new and doesn't really get who Dan is, he's like the community manager at SoRare, head of content as well, I think. Probably some other things. All your questions, requests, and feedback have been shared with the product and leadership team and Nicholas, and it has been heard. Nicholas, myself, and the team had a very productive meeting to discuss the ongoing challenges, progress, and when I will be in a position to communicate more. Our goal is to bring more clarity to our gameplay and reward system so that our core community can plan ahead months in advance if they choose to do so. When are they going to give more clarity? They don't want to share anything more before they're fully happy with the rewards model and our gameplay progress and plans. We will be ready to share all this by the end of March. Until you can share more, you'll have to be patient for a few more weeks and keep the feedback coming in the meantime. So that's what was said. What were your initial thoughts, or what's your vibe on all this?
I mean, I have to be honest. I'm not, I'm part of Techers Discord, and that's been great, right? He clearly, is probably more in tune with the reward system than anyone else I know.
Techers has a Discord. Everyone's going to be messaging, getting into this.
Wait,
Techers,
really?
get me into your bloody Discord.
Am I not supposed to say that?
I don't know, but it's funny now. Let's go. What Discord?
We're live. I really like that community. Anyway, the honest answer is I personally don't care as much. As frustrating as getting a 465 plus point, and getting a tier 1 was, I just move on to the next game week, right? So the way I think of prizes, I think of like, I go after the T0s and I don't see anything else. So I base my lineups on T0s, T stars, and I just, and I try to, win them as much as I can, right? And there's some weeks, and for me, it's like All-Star, Chell, Champions Europe, and then U23, right? Now, what I do care about is D2, and D2 rewards and the use cases for T3 rares, only because right now, from a user perspective, I'm just prioritizing D3, and D3 T0 T1s, but not the T3s or the D2s or the super res, right? T3 res and super res. I have, if I'm gonna die on one hill, it's gonna be the and there's so many hills. I'd prefer to advocate for a much better reward system for D2, and much better usage and application for T3 rares or T3 super res, which hopefully leads to progression, right? Because you want people to start off from one tier to go to another tier. Now, inherently, some people won't be able to cross that divide, and that's okay, right? Because we all have our lanes, and sometimes some people can outbid us, and we can't afford certain things. It is what it is. But I think that's what I care more about. I don't keep track. I don't keep track of the the reward system at the tier 3s, only because I just move like every week. It sometimes frustrates me, but I don't. My frustration is short-lived because I move on to the next game week. The instances where I've posted some crazy scores and not won anything. It is annoying, but then again, I get very excited about the upcoming game week and I focus on that instead. So that's how I'm probably the last person, to talk to you about, D3 rewards and mechanics, because I care more about D2 playability and T3, super rare T3 rare playability.
The last 2 times I've shot 400 plus was a 414 and like a 440 in under 23 rare. Both times I've got tier 2s or worse. It was Ty Baribo and I think I got Mac Targay, which is a shame, but the game isn't about who can shoot the highest score. It's about beating your competitors. It's about beating the next guy. The other argument to that is that people could lose engagement very quickly. And I have to be honest, I have put a significant amount of money in here and I am buying big players and playing the best. And I'm engaged, I think, through the content and the thrill of the chase as much as the actual reward itself. But I can see people who are trying to play on a budget, the way it currently stands, it could be quite disengaging very quickly.
I can see
and that's why even when you go to limiteds now, the amount of competitors there, which is amazing for SoRare, the amount of people entering limited all-star, even though there's no like thresholds there, limited all-star versus even the other limited divisions versus rewards, it is very hard. Because of the number of lineups, inevitably people are going to shoot 500s. It's going to happen. So it does come back to that tier 2, tier 3 super rares, tier 3 rares, and utility, and how can these be played. I don't know if it's those kind of lower average special weeklies or if there needs to be a lower average division full stop. Probably there does. And I know you're adding complexity, and I know you're adding more divisions, and I know there's more and more and more and more. It just adds utility.
I think I personally would want to see more utility in the weekly. I do think there's an opportunity. There's a huge opportunity to expand the weeklies to include some fun stuff, right? Just some like random stuff. That's one. I do think there's an opportunity to also include another. Like, there's so many different leagues that you can include, right? That could be, scores below 30 league, right? Where you have super rare, unique, all that stuff. There's an opportunity for SoRare to do something really, really nice here, and I'm very optimistic and hopeful. I think they know that this is an issue. I'd like to think that they know that this is an issue, the utility of T3 rares and T3 super rares. And I'd like to think that they'll do something about it. So this is something I care more about versus the fluctuations, versus the rewards, because I do think, I want SoRare to be more accessible. I want the average person to come in and spend as little or as much as they want and have as much utility in all these cards as possible. And that also means creating more accessible leagues, more fun gameplays. So I think that's I want to say that's inevitable, but I'm hopeful and optimistic that something around those things will come up. Because again, I think all things equal, the team knows that this is an issue, right? Like when we get a tier 3 reward, like unless it's a U23 or maybe Champ Europe or I don't care about Champ Europe,
a rookie card or something.
Exactly. Like we don't we're not going to do anything with it.
What do you think? Sorry, I butted in on you.
No, please.
I was going to say, what do you think on rewarding DMPs to bolster the reward pots a bit?
I think you can see that's what I mean by having fun, right? That's what I mean by rewarding DMPs can be really interesting. You have to, it has to be one of those subs but not coming in type of a situation.
Not even, what I actually meant was rewarding them physically, giving out DMPs.
Oh, rewarding DMPs.
If someone's a DMP, they don't get rewarded. I'm just thinking to bolster those numbers, there's a lot of cards of guys who don't play that aren't being rewarded. But
you see, the thing is, some people like the DMP players and some people don't, right? So if you ask me, I think giving something is better than giving nothing. And the second thing is people are going to complain regardless. So you're better off giving something, right?
Yeah.
And if it's a DMP player that hasn't played in 6 months and it's a third goalkeeper sub, I think
they get the transfer,
no, but also, you might, sell it off in the secondary. I mean, you get something, and getting something, I think, is a better form of user engagement than getting nothing. So I'm always for getting something and including DMPs.
Yeah. Well, look, that's kind of what I wanted to just throw out there in the rewards. I think I just wanted to give you another chance. Is there anything else in your D2 frustrations that you wanted to air, or have you kind of thrown that out there?
No, I think I think there has. I used to play D2, quite often. I would say 7, 8, 9, 10 months ago. I forget, right? Long time ago, and I used to get some interesting rewards. I got a Payet, Dimitri Payet, super rare, which is he's
That's
on
a
a. I
cracking
mean,
reward.
I've that was a tier 2, tier 3 super rare. I forget what it was, but that was brilliant. That guy is quarterbacking my D3 lineups, right? And I probably put in a shitty D2 team for that, but I want to see more of that. I want to see more rewards in the D2 structure, because what this means is like people like me who have a lot of good rares and like below average to average super rares, right? My best super rares probably, okay, I have a Holler and Blind that I got very early, but the Modric and the Pyres of the world, I've got like old ones. So those are like my 4 good ones, I think. I forget. Arson is
Zakarian.
Zakarian's good, but he's he'll grow into it. But that's okay. A good group of 5 or 6. You want to incentivize people like this to play in the D2s, because now what that means is I don't use my super rares in the D3s, which means, you know what I mean? And and for the right price, I would totally play my Blind and Holler and Modric and Paya super rares in the D2s and to compete with the Marks of the world, right? But right now, I'm just concentrating all my best cards for the D3s.
I'm the exact same. Yeah. I mean, I'm the exact same to the point that, like, I think in my lineup, in my team, I do have, if I look it up here, I do have one probably quite strong under 23 D2 team. I could probably play, like De Kaiser, who's just a super rare goalkeeper. I have Jonathan David for forward, or Rafael Leao. One of them could play. In midfield, I've probably got Yari Verscharen. I mean, Kakare, Kulusevski, Nicholas Raskin. One of them will do. And then, like, defense, I've got Nico Williams, who got a good move to Fulham. Melvin Bard. I've got Johan Handel, who's a guy out in Austria who does well. I've got a couple of Pershers whenever he comes into the lineup. Basically, this isn't a humble brag or a flex. This is a case of, like, I could put out, I think, a strong under 23 team, but the prizes just don't make it worth jeopardizing 2 stronger D3 teams or 3.
Exactly right.
It's just not worth it at the minute. And now I find I put those guys that I named to you most weeks, unless they have a shit fixture, I'll put them in a D3 lineup, and I'll put my leftover super rares into the under 23s, and they're never going to compete when people are playing Haalands and Mbappe's and whatever else is, they're just not going to. So, and I mean, to actually get better than that, you're talking, all right, go and dump 15 grand. So where's the
and that's not enough too, and that's not enough if you want to
it's not. No,
that'll get you.
That'll get me one, maybe one strong.
One and a half. Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, I agree. I miss the days of D2 decent D2 rewards.
Yeah.
And by the way, I understand my lane. My lane isn't D1. I physically cannot manifest that amount of capital to buy D1 cards, and that's okay. I'm very happy with that. D1's not my lane. D2, I kind of want it to be my lane, because I do like the playability of these super rare cards in D3 and D2. Right, I do like the flexibility. I do like the rare cards because I can play it in D4, D3, D2. I like that.
Yeah.
That's I'll be a very happy little muppet if I can just compete competitively in D2 and D3.
All right, Kermit, we'll move on to some questions, will we?
Yeah.
So before we do, I want to give a big shout out to everyone who's left a review, particularly on Spotify over the last few weeks. We're over 142, 143 reviews, something like that. 5 stars at the minute. Keep it coming. I love you all so much. If you're watching on YouTube, please do like the video and subscribe to 1:37 p.m. Drop a comment below with something you've learned or anything. It just helps this video get out there. But definitely, wherever you are, please do review or like or do whatever. All the nice things that you should do. And yeah, let's go on to some questions from Twitter. So I hit a milestone this week. You've been there for some time. I'm part of the 10K club on Twitter. I got 10,000 followers
a couple
of days ago.
Congratulations.
Which is lovely. So thanks a million to everyone who's there. If you aren't, come on over and say hello and go and follow Sriram while you're there. We put out a picture It was Mo Salah, your name, a YNWA straight in, a Salah image for a Man United fan. What's that about?
Yeah, I should have seen that coming. Salah was the first, my first lineup in SoRare. I think I won the D3. I won the D3 All Star, and I got Salah as a reward, and that just hooked me in. So for me, that was a very, it was pretty seminal. It was pretty meaningful, and it was the start of my my SoRare experience. So for me, that card is something I don't think I'll ever sell. But yeah,
nice.
so that's that hence Salah.
Do you know what we have in common, just to go off topic, because I've just clicked over to SoRare there quickly, and my gallery, I had it arranged by under 23 super rares to try and flex to you.
Yeah.
I realized we both have a Per Shares super rare. You have one, don't you?
Yeah.
There aren't many of them out there. Well, there's probably quite a few at this stage, but yeah, is there a reason for that? Talk to me. Give him a good pump.
Yeah, I bought him randomly many months ago because he was the cheapest young IX defender. It turns out that he's got some playability now.
Yeah,
nice.
He's not playing too much, but for me, it's one of those where I genuinely think the downside is he gets a move to somewhere like Milan or like I don't even know where. But the downside is he pisses off in bench warms and doesn't start. But the upside is Timber or
someone leaves.
His mate leaves, and Per Shares becomes an under 23.
Yeah.
Like Ajax defender, he could be the next Timber.
By the way, if Lisandro Martinez goes to Barcelona or something, you have a Timber Per Shares partnership. So again, one of my random buys from a year ago but that's a card I wanted to sell for a long time, but I just no one I ended up keeping it. So
I'm actually really tempted to go like I feel like I've went pretty balls deep here. I bought the 2 super rares and I have a rare, but I'm tempted to like go all out on that call. I'm tempted to like pick up as many rares as I can. It could be down. It could go down, but I think he's a quality player regardless.
Yeah.
I think his price at the minute reflects a decent young centre back at a champion squad.
You want to be. You see, the thing about players that are playing there are 2 ways. There's only one way his price can go. Okay, if he stays at Ajax, his price will go up. Right, so so that's Ajax is the best team in Challenger Europe. He's the backup defender. If he steps up, great. But if he doesn't, everywhere else is probably a step down. Except Real Madrid, Barcelona.
Or like a parallel move where he starts like
exactly. So and the chances of a Barcelona, Real, PSG, United, Liverpool getting him, is very low. Right, so he's probably going to end up somewhere else, Champions Europe, with an okay team, and his score is not going to be that good anyway. So that's one purchase I would not recommend getting because he's already there's only, if he stays, great because you've got coverage, right? But if you're hoping to trade, there's he has to go to the top 5 Champions Europe team, otherwise you're not. And by the way, will he start? You don't know.
You see, for me, I disagree. I feel the upside outweighs the downside massively. I feel if he was a starter at Ajax and his price was where it is, the only ways down, akin to Coop Miners, akin to other players who are monsters in their respective league and they go away and they bench warm or they rotate or they don't score as well. But I just feel like, again, it is one of those. I'm not saying the only ways up. I'm not even trying to pump him because I'm not selling him anytime soon. I will sell him if he goes to the moon, but I think the upside is Timber is worth like 3 ETH, right? Let's call that the ceiling. What's the floor for an under 23 centre back who's come out of Ajax, who could end up anywhere? If he gets some game time, I don't know. What is the absolute downside within the next 16 to 18 months? Maybe 0.1?
0.5? Oh, you mean the absolute downside?
Yeah, unless he gets injured or something. Like if he gets injured or dies, we're fucked. But I mean, if he if he goes off to Bologna and becomes a starter, if he goes to Juventus and bench warms, if he goes to, I feel like for an under 23 defender, I think he's played for the Dutch under 21s. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. Again, this is too long a segment on a specific
player. Probably 0.3 max floor.
Yeah, so I'm thinking like, I don't know. I just think the upside versus downside. But anyway, I just thought I'd bring him up because I spotted you had a super rare. But I feel like 99% of people who listen don't give a fuck about per shares. So we'll ask some questions. There's your weekly pump of per shares. We're gonna get that until he moons. Okay, so a good question from Jay Fraz. We'll go through them in order of most liked, as always. When the whole Premier League joins SoRare, hopefully this year, who will be the first 3 players that you'll look to buy? Now, before I ask that, there was a question about what if we don't get the Premier League?
I hope we do.
I hope we do. Yeah, here it is. It's from James at Shoeshine. I'll ask this one first. Just, do you think we'll really get the Premier League? None of us know what's going on behind the scenes. Do you think that we'll honestly get the top 20 leagues? By the way, James isn't interested in other American sports. So we'll come back to Jay Fraz. Do you think it happens?
I want it to happen. I'm optimistic that it'll happen. I'm hopeful that it'll happen. There's no one else is doing what SoRare is doing with football. I don't see any reason why the EPL would not want to work with SoRare. There's no one else, monetizing NFTs, creating a highly engaged community. They've done it with the Bundesliga, La Liga. It's only a matter of time. I'd like to think it's only a matter of time.
I don't know how any other company can promise the Premier League more revenue.
And that's going to be user engagement.
User engagement, revenue. The only way I can see, and again, Sriram, maybe you can just correct me here. This isn't somewhere I'm particularly well versed in the world of investing and licensing. The only way I see it happening the other way is where some weasel gets in, steals the license, and then tries to sell it to SoRare in a year's time because he knows someone or because there's a pre-existing relationship. Maybe that doesn't matter.
I don't think that's the case, because the EPL is very savvy when it comes to monetizing licenses. And every year you see the NBC, you see everyone, all the broadcasters around the world paying, astronomical sums of money to buy these licenses. If SoRare does not win it, it's probably because someone else paid so much money to win the license, an amount that would have made SoRare go, holy fuck, that's too much. It's not worth it. Over a span of 5, 7, 8, 10 years, not worth it. If we paid that amount of money, there's no way we're going to recoup that back. That's the only instance I can think about.
I think they would. Yeah. I was going to say, would they not offer like a revenue share type vibe instead? So
that's a good question. So let me sort of paint the landscape of licensing. And by the way, again, I want to preface this by saying I don't know what's happening between SoRare and EPL, and so this is just me. So I used to do a lot of licensing work for Spotify. So I sort of, there's multiple, ways this could be arranged. So one is, there's something called a minimum guarantee, right? Where the company that acquires the license will be like, hey, listen, we'll pay you at least a minimum of $500 million over the next 10 years, right? For the licenses to these, right? And then it could be, a bidding war between the minimum guarantees, right? Right. That's one model where, SoRare or someone else would promise X amount of capital over 5, 10, whatever year period. The second way is it could be a combination of minimum guarantee and or revenue share, right? So it could be, hey, you know what, we'll guarantee you at least whatever a year, right? But we'll also split revenue, we'll split revenue this way, right? Let's say, I don't know, 50-50, 40-60. And that'll be the main business model, right? Revenue share. And if it doesn't hit the minimum that we guarantee you, we'll backfill that, right? Yeah. We'll backfill that ourselves, right? So that could be another one, rev share with minimum guarantee. Another one could just be pure rev share, right? Which like, give it to us, whatever we make, we'll give you X%, right? It could be very simple. So in a bad year, SoRare does badly, EPL does badly. So I don't know. So there could, so many different ways, this model could work out. But the EPL is, world class when it comes to negotiations. They know what they're doing. So I think it could be a combination of minimum guarantee and or rev share. So, I don't know, but that's how it'll probably end up, I think.
Yeah. Well, look, fingers crossed. Let's hope it happens. If they do join, Jay says when, who will be the first 3 players that you would look to buy?
Man, I will probably go for the Manchester City defense because I hate the roulette that happens with the attack. I would go for an Arsenal defense. I'd avoid United. I'd go for like a Brighton defense. Halftime, Munich down 1-0. I'd go for 3 players. I'd go for.
Sorry, Brendan Aronson got the assist.
Oh, here, congratulations.
My guy, yeah.
Uh,
Sorry.
I go for Diaz. I already have Diaz. I go for Cancelo.
Cancelo's a monster.
I'd go for Tierney. I'd go for the defenders with fullback potential with the fullback. I'd go for Cancelo. I'd go for
Cancelo's scores are sick.
Yeah,
Have you seen them?
I'd go for KDB's out there. I'd go for Laporte. I'd go for Edison. Yeah, and then if you look at other teams, Arsenal, I'll go for Gabriel. Gabriel's on the platform. I'll go for Tierney. Yeah, I'll go for the defenders. I looked at Harry Kane, but Harry Kane is I don't know what the decisives and I don't know what his scores are, but I'll probably stick to defenders.
Probably a good time to buy Harry Kane. I imagine he's not if he was on the platform, I don't imagine his price would be as high as it could be. But looking at him there, he's actually been doing okay recently, and his scores are pretty nice on SoRare. He would be worth a lot actually. Now, I would go for Phil Foden 100%. If I had to pick a guy, if I could buy them, if I could afford them, I think Phil Foden would be my number one. There are a couple of nice young lads at Arsenal. Chelsea have them as well. I don't know.
Reece James.
I wonder what he's like. Let's see. Does he get decimated by possession lost? I was very impressed with last night. Nuno Mendes. He was very good.
Yeah. He pinned who's that Muppet?
Carvajal?
Carvajal back. Oof.
Yeah, big time. He just
Hakimi was a goat in that game. Did you see him? Oof.
Yeah, I did. I think I expected that from Hakimi. I felt like Nuno Mendes would be a bit more, I don't know, raw, but he was very good, particularly in defense. I kind of had him pegged as like decent going forward, one of a left foot, and a lot of pace. I didn't really rate his defending, but last night he got in the way a lot, which is important against Madrid. But anyway, yeah, I think Reece James would be up there. There's a few players. I don't know who else. I mean, you can pick the high scorers. Like there's loads of high scores. I love Trent. I mean, I have two of them already. I don't think I'd get another, but I would definitely look to fill out the Liverpool stack. I love Andy Robertson. I'm actually really annoyed at myself that I didn't buy him sooner. Whenever he was about 0.3, I think I knew he was underpriced massively.
I got him. For 800, whatever. I forget what it was. 0.1, 0.2.
I knew he was underpriced. Like I knew it, and I was looking. I was like, I'd love him, and I actually think I suggested a couple of trades to people, and none went. I was also very close recently to trading a Trent for a super rare Andy Robertson and a Bastoni. But I asked for ETH on top because the guy I think was valuing him a bit off at the time.
Wait, you wanted to give away your Trent for a Robertson and a Bastoni super rare?
A super rare Robertson. And a Bastoni. I didn't necessarily want to do it. I asked for a little bit of ETH on top. The guy really wanted a Trent, and I have two. So the super rare Andy Robertson, I was like, that's like a GOAT card on the platform for me.
Monster card.
And I thought Bastoni will come straight in and slot in for Trent. Probably
that's a very good trade. Holy shit.
I thought it would have been, and it didn't happen. So, and the guy's got a Trent. So, shout out. I think it was Quick. Shout out if you listen. But I just think Robertson's a monster. But yeah, that's I definitely fill out the Liverpool players. I think I'm going to say this for the first ever time, and it is purely down to exposure to Trent. I think I'm slowly becoming like a Liverpool fan, and it's kind of sick, and I never really want to admit that, because I like to think of myself as like not really a fan of anyone, but I think I have the largest exposure to Trent, and I always want to see him do well, which inevitably means that I'm always screaming for Liverpool to do well.
Look, I'm tripled up on Liverpool in FPL, and I've got Robertson, I've got Salah, Jota in my SoRare team, so I'm kind of rooting for them to do well as well. But my first love is always United. But I, to answer that question, I would stock up on Liverpool defense, City defense, Arsenal, and then Brighton. By the way, Brighton and Southampton would be the affordable teams that look at to get some good players.
So if you have time, we'll do one or two more quickly, and we'll try and wrap this up in about 5 or 6 minutes. Does that suit you?
Yeah, of course.
We'll try and bang these out because I'm aware you need to go. I don't need to go anywhere, but I'm aware I've taken up a lot of your time, and we can maybe catch second halves. It's Haber, aka Ryan, who is another content creator who's come into the space. Welcome, Ryan. He makes predominantly FIFA content. He's become quite enthusiastic about SoRare. So, welcome, Ryan. Has asked if either of you could rewind time and change a decision you've made in relation to SoRare. For example, a purchase or passing up of a purchase. What would it be and why? Mine is 100% hands down the Super Rare Wesley I traded for a Van Dijk. I traded the Van Dijk and 0.2 ETH. It was an absolute travesty. That is it. Everyone knows that answer from me already. What is your answer? You look dejected. You look actually heartbroken. I don't know if you're able to tell this story.
I sold a Matip Super Rare for 0.5 ETH.
Oh man.
I sold a Lucas Hernandez Super Rare for about 1 ETH. I sold a Kingsley Coman Super Rare for about 1 ETH.
This goes on. There's not one example here.
I sold a Dario Benedetto Unique for about 1 ETH, close to less than 1 ETH.
The Hernandez would probably be worth like 5 ETH now. I don't even know. The Mata, I don't know, 2.5 or 3.
There's so many mistakes. So many mistakes I've made.
Matip is an absolute monster. The big issue with him, and I sold him, I think, at like 0.4. In fact, if I go on the price graph, no, just the rare. Sorry.
If you go to the Matip Super Rare, you can see I sold it to Tom C. For I think 0.5. Look, forget what it was, but you can see how his price just shot up. I don't know when Matip's going to start. That's the problem.
That's what I'm saying. Like, so I actually sold him at what was a peak at the time of 0.45. He kind of dipped back down to about 0.4, and now he's up at like 0.65 was the peak. And now
check out the Super Rare, and you can see the my sale. There's a walk of shame. That's the sale of shame for me.
Oh geez, yeah, okay, that looks bad. Whenever you look at it that way, you sold him for 0.5.
Yeah, totally 0.5.
Not too long ago.
No.
Like 5 months ago, and he sold a month later than yours. 2 months later, but 6 weeks after you sold him for 0.5, he sold for 3.2. That is kind of heartbreaking.
Oh,
yeah.
I won Matip as a reward, and whenever I win rewards, I tend to get rid of them very quickly, and I just underprice them just to get rid of them. And I didn't think Matip was a starter because I know it's just it is what it is. You gotta move on.
I have to say, his L40 is slightly worse than Van Dijk's, but his L15 and L5 are better. He is a quarter the price of Van Dijk, and he's the same age. Now, I understand that the issue is that Van Dijk is 100% nailed and that Matip could be rotated for Konate out of nowhere. And that's where the killer comes in. But he's the second best defender over the last 15 games on the platform. When you're looking at Kikuchi's going for the price Kikuchi's going for, he's only 30 years old. I mean, I think Matip is actually decent value. I'm just putting it out there. I do, because I mean, what happens next? What could happen next is he just sits as the backup centre back next season.
Yeah,
that could happen. So maybe he's shit value. But anyway, we'll move on just on the basis of time. You've had a few horror stories. I've had one in particular. I should probably have thought of another one, but based on time, we'll ask one more question. 137 game out the door. Mortz has asked, what's better, a win in the limited divisions or rare and above, and why? So I think what he's getting at here is the satisfaction of beating tens of thousands of people versus the better reward, I think.
Yeah, I don't play limited, so I wouldn't know. But for me, whenever I podium, it just feels so good.
So I wish I knew what that felt like.
Podiuming anywhere feels so good. Winning a tier 0 feels good, whether it's limited, rare, super rare, doesn't matter. But I've only podiumed, I think, 5 or 6 times, maybe 7, maybe less than 10 times. I think I've won a league maybe 3 to 4 times, but it feels so good to podium, and it feels so good to get a tier 0 rare because the anticipation of opening up, I have this process that I go through. My girlfriend sits with me. We go through every card. We do some research. It's just so much fun. So it's more fun if it's a tier 0 card.
If there's any couples on SoRare, reach out. I'd love to have a couple on SoRare on the podcast. If anyone's significant other is interested or has an account or whatever, please reach out. I'd love to talk to you. But yeah, no, I think like for me, the reward matters more than the satisfaction and the bragging rights personally. But it would be nice to win a limited thing. Just like winning the common would be amazing, just to say you beat 100,000 people.
Yeah.
Update: 100,000 people broken through on the common for this midweek. 100,000 entrants, 108,000 the last time I checked. It could have hit 110.
Wow. So I've stopped playing commons. So is it one person per common team?
One person per common team. Now there is a theory, or there is definitely some bots out there. But how many? It's impossible to know. The bottom line is that there's like, I don't know, 110,000 or more individual entries.
Is SoRare Academy part of that, or is that different?
Different.
SoRare Academy is different. Okay. Wow, different. That's a lot of players. That's good. So let's assume 30-40% of bots, right? Whatever.
Yeah.
That's still 60,000 players.
Yeah. So yeah, exciting. Shout out to SoRare Buzz, Gardner, Paul Moorcroft, Hinty, Mark YNWA, we mentioned him, Kevin T, Coxinho, Jack Doyle, Deco, and Perez. Lots of good questions out there. Thanks so much for submitting them.
You know what we haven't spoken about yet?
Tell me.
The Muppet incident.
The Muppet incident. I called you it roughly earlier. I didn't want to delve in. Look, if you have the time, I'll talk about it. I'm going nowhere.
No, it's fine. It's I I called AJ a Muppet, but it was I call him a Muppet now as well. No,
AJ, you're a Muppet.
Look, it's a term of endearment. I think so the backstory is I got called. I'm from Malaysia, and I worked in all these different countries, and my boss, my boss from New Zealand called me a Muppet once, and I got really offended. And then I found out that it's just it's a term of endearment, and I've since used that term with a lot of people, and I use it affectionately. So when I called AJ a Muppet, I was when I used the word Muppet, I used it as in an endearing way, but I understand how people might react to that. But anyway, just wanted to put it out there.
Sounds to me like you're digging a bigger hole for yourself here.
No.
I'm just twisting. I'm just throwing shit. I think I've found the comment. It's kind of funny to read back on, and then you trying to. I use Muppet all the time, but I can understand why it might have pissed people off.
Yeah.
Everyone breathe in, breathe out. Yeah, that's kind of funny. Just search Rivaldo 2000 and Muppet if you're wondering what we're on about in the official SoRare Discord. But Ram, it's time. It's time for the 137 game. Last week, Techers chose Fancom Bruges and Hoet from Anderlecht, and he scored 109. A bit unfortunate for him. You have to pick two players for me that you think will combine for a score of 137 points. Again, we're trying to revamp this. If anyone can think of something good that we can give away, we've had a suggestion of pint glasses. If anyone would want a SoRare pint glass, please let me know. If there's enough requests, we'll make it happen. But yeah, two players. Hit me.
I would choose Salah and Gabriel.
Salah and Gabriel from Arsenal.
Yeah.
I like it. Salah for the big 80, Gabriel with a clean sheet. Not far off.
I think Salah with some form of goal involvement, some decisive against Norwich, and Gabriel because I think Arsenal, they've kept clean sheets before. But Newcastle, turned the corner with all these different signings, and I think they'll put one past Gabriel. But Gabriel's got a very strong, I think he'll get a 40 and a 50. I think Salah will get her, 90, 80, 90, and then hopefully that works out.
It works out. Well, best of luck. Thank you so much for playing, and thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Honestly, it was great. I think I really enjoyed the conversation. I hope people listening did. Have you anything to plug or anywhere people can find you before you go, or anything to say?
Nah, just follow me on Twitter if you want. Sriram Krishnan at Twitter. If not, I'll look forward to trading, or look forward to rejecting your 0.01 ETH offers on SoRare. But it was a pleasure. I love the game. Love your podcast. Happy to be on board. Looking forward to meeting in person and hanging out.
Absolutely. Look, thank you so much. And everyone watching, thank you, or listening, for your time. Thank you so much. We'll see you again next week.